Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight we step into a world where secrets burn hotter than desire. She's the fierce housekeeper with everything to lose. He's the billionaire who's learned that some walls are meant to be broken, and some fires impossible to resist. Tonight, boundaries blur, and the chase becomes a delicious game of temptation, control, and surrender. The agency had warned her the job paid more than double the usual rate, but no one lasted more than a week. Not because of the work, no, the mansion was spotless, always had been. The problem was the house itself. Perched on the highest hill above the coast, the estate loomed like something from a forgotten era. Pale stone, ivy-covered balconies, shuttered windows. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but lights burned at night, sometimes flickering from floor to floor, as if someone moved through the rooms without ever being seen. The man who owned it, Damien Blackwood, was a name whispered behind hands. Reclusive, brilliant, tragic, a fortune built in silence. A life lived behind locked gates, no photographs, no interviews, only rumors. Some said he was scarred, others claimed he'd gone mad after losing someone. But none of that mattered to her. Sarah Langley needed the job. Her brother's medical bills didn't care about ghost stories or eccentric billionaires. And so, on a crisp autumn morning, she stood at the iron gate, her backpack slung over one shoulder, the wind tugging at the hem of her thrift store coat. The gate creaked open on its own. No one greeted her, no note, no staff, only the sound of leaves skittering across stone as she climbed the long path to the front door, heart beating faster with each step. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar wood and old money. Marble floors gleamed. The chandelier above the foyer sparkled with untouched crystals. It was too clean, like a place no one truly lived in. But she could feel it. Someone was here. She began her routine the way she always did, starting from the farthest wing, moving room to room, dusting, polishing, wiping away the invisible fingerprints of time. Still no sign of him. Only once, as she passed the staircase, did she pause, certain she saw movement at the landing. A flick of black, like the hem of a coat disappearing down a hallway. She froze, waited, but silence returned, heavy and complete. By the third day, she accepted the rules of the house. Speak to no one. Clean only the marked rooms. Never go past the third floor. And above all, never open the double doors at the end of the east corridor. She didn't ask why. She just worked. Until one evening, just after sunset, she passed those forbidden doors and found them slightly ajar. Her hand hesitated over the handle. The air beyond was warmer, scented, something dark, expensive, intoxicating. A faint creak echoed behind her, and she turned quickly. but the corridor was empty. She shut the doors and told herself she imagined it. But that night, when she washed her hands in the tiny staff sink, she saw it clearly in the mirror. A shadow standing at the end of the hallway, watching her, tall, still, silent. He didn't speak, didn't move, only disappeared the second she turned around. She didn't sleep. Not that night. Not after seeing the eyes she hadn't meant to meet. Cold, silver gray, sharp as steel beneath moonlight. The man no one saw was real, and he was watching her. Sarah told herself she was imagining things. The mind played tricks in places like this. Places where silence wasn't just absence but presence, where the air felt like it had weight, where you caught yourself holding your breath without realizing it. Still, she couldn't shake the memory of those eyes, sharp, pale, unmoving. She returned the next morning expecting to be dismissed. Maybe he'd fire her without a word. Maybe he'd leave a letter, cold and unsigned. But there was nothing. Only a new list of rooms to clean and the same unbroken stillness. Except now, she felt it everywhere. Not eyes on her back exactly. Something subtler, like the air shifted when she entered a room. Like her movements were being marked, studied. She made herself work slower, not out of fear, curiosity. What kind of man could live like this, alone, locked away in a palace surrounded by crystal chandeliers and untouched libraries and sunrooms that never saw sun? On the fourth day, she entered the West Library, a room she hadn't been assigned, but that called to her all the same. The moment she stepped inside, the scent hit her. Leather, wood smoke, something richer beneath. The kind of scent that didn't just belong to a place, but to a person. She moved quietly between the shelves, wiping down volumes she didn't dare open. She let her fingers linger on the spines, old editions, many in foreign languages. And then, in the far corner, she found the armchair. It faced the window, deep green velvet, worn soft from use. And the cushion was warm. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she turned, slowly, scanning the shadows. Nothing, no footsteps, but she wasn't alone. That night she took longer in the halls, slower steps, a glance over her shoulder that lingered. She passed mirrors and checked them. Once she stopped in the dining room just to see if the silverware had moved. It hadn't, but a glass of wine had been poured, half full, still red, still warm. And then came the moment she would never forget. It was near midnight. She'd finished in the guest hallway, turned out the lights, and was locking the broom closet when a sound stopped her. Footsteps, not hers. Slow, deliberate, one floor above. She climbed the stairs without thinking. Something drew her forward, The marble felt cool under her bare fingertips as she reached the landing. There at the end of the hallway, he stood, for the first time, fully visible. Damian Blackwood. He wasn't a shadow anymore. He was tall, dressed in black, the sleeves of his shirt rolled to his elbows, collar open at his throat, hair dark, swept back, not quite perfect, and his eyes, those same silver gray eyes, met hers. He didn't speak, didn't move. He only stared as if trying to decide what to make of her. She should have said something, apologized, stepped away, but she didn't. She took a step forward, and so did he. Just one. That was all. Then, like fog pulling back into the trees, he turned and disappeared into the darkness behind him. Sarah stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling, though she couldn't say why. She had seen him, he had seen her, and now everything had changed. The next morning, the rules had changed. A new list lay folded on the polished entry table where she always found her tasks. Same careful script, same clean paper, but this time there was something added, something that hadn't been there before. Master suite, clean floors, windows, change sheets. She read it twice, 3 times. She looked up the staircase. The air felt warmer than before. That room had been forbidden from the start. It was the one space no housekeeper ever entered. Not even the agency head dared assign it. The last girl who tried to clean it had been fired before her mop hit the marble. But now, he wanted her in there. Her hands trembled as she gathered her supplies. She paused outside the double doors at the top of the west wing. They stood open an inch, as if waiting. The room beyond was dimly lit, curtains half drawn, bathing the space in cool gray light. Inside, shadows stretched across velvet armchairs and a massive bed draped in black sheets. The air was heavy, still touched with that scent she'd noticed in the library. Leather, smoke, heat, and something else. Her breath caught. He was there, lying on the bed. One arm thrown behind his head, the other resting across his chest. Shirtless, bare skin dusted with dark stubble, chest rising and falling slowly. His jaw shadowed in silence, eyes closed, asleep or pretending. Sarah hesitated in the doorway. She could walk away, come back later, but her feet moved. She stepped inside. Every sound was suddenly louder. The soft creak of her boots on the floor, the whisper of her cleaning cloth unrolling, the gentle tap of a spray bottle. She avoided looking directly at him, but her gaze kept sliding back, drawn to the way the sheets clung to his hip bones, the cut of his abs, the slight furrow between his brows, as if he were dreaming something he couldn't escape. She began at the windows, wiped the glass, cleaned the sill, moved to the dresser, dusted carefully around an old watch, a closed book, a crystal glass, with a few drops of whiskey left inside. Then she turned to the bed. He hadn't moved, still breathing steady, still silent. She swallowed hard and reached for the laundry basket, trying not to make a sound as she pulled back the corner of the sheet. Her fingers brushed fabric. A shift. His head turned slightly, just enough to reveal the edge of a smirk. He was awake, watching her through barely open eyes. She froze. The air turned electric. He didn't speak, didn't move, only followed her with those gray eyes, lids heavy with something unreadable. She straightened, cloth in hand, pulse thundering. "I was told to clean in here," she whispered, more to the silence than to him. His voice came like smoke, low, rough, intimate. "And do you always follow orders?" She should have answered, should have left, but she couldn't. The tension pressed between them like a second heartbeat. "I need the job," she said, quietly. His gaze lingered on her face, dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "Then finish." And just like that, he closed his eyes again, but not fully, only enough to let her know he was listening, waiting, testing her. She moved again, slowly, tension coiled tight in her shoulders. Every pass of her cloth across the side table, every soft rustle of the sheets she folded, felt indecent under his gaze. When she finished, she placed the fresh linen beside the bed. Her hand brushed the mattress edge. Warmth. She turned to leave, and that's when he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You clean like someone who wants to be caught." She stopped, didn't turn around. His voice followed her out the door. "And you walk like someone who doesn't know what she's waking up." The door closed with a soft click. She stood outside it, breathless, burning. He hadn't touched her, hadn't moved from that bed, but she had never felt so undone. The rain started with a whisper, a soft patter against the windows, a distant rumble in the hills. Then the sky cracked wide open, and the world was drowned in thunder and silver. Sarah had stayed longer than usual. The house felt different tonight. The air was heavy with static, and her skin prickled with every flicker of lightning that lit the hallways. She'd just finished reorganizing the glass cabinets in the dining room when the lights flickered, then went out completely. She stood still, holding her breath. Silence, then the storm roared again. With no staff and no generator kicking in, the house folded in on itself, dark, vast, and echoing. She reached for the emergency flashlight in the cupboard, but it was missing. A voice, low and unhurried, drifted from the shadows. "Power grid's old. It happens." She turned, heart hammering, and found him standing in the doorway. "Damien, His shirt sleeves were rolled, collar open again, trousers loose at his hips, barefoot, effortlessly composed in the dark, as if the storm had come for him, not the house. She swallowed, voice smaller than she meant it to be. I was just about to leave. He tilted his head. You won't make it down the hill. Roads flood. Stay until it passes. Lightning lit the hallway behind him, white and sudden. A second later, thunder rolled through the house, loud enough to rattle the walls. Somewhere upstairs, a shutter banged loose. He didn't flinch, but she did. He noticed. You're afraid of storms. No, she lied. Just the dark. He studied her for a long moment, then turned, walking away. Come on. She followed before she could second guess herself. They walked down a narrow servant's staircase, and he opened a heavy wooden door tucked behind a wine rack. The temperature dropped immediately. Stone walls, lanterns flickering, rows of vintage bottles stretching into shadow. The cellar, he said simply. It's safe here. She stepped inside. The door swung shut behind them with a solid thunk. Then silence, trapped. The storm howled outside. But in here, the stillness was intimate, claustrophobic. A warmth spread beneath her skin. Part nerves, part something darker. He lit one of the lanterns on the wall, cast in the space in soft gold. Shadows danced across his face. She looked away, brushing hair from her damp forehead. How long does it usually last? He shrugged. Could be hours. Their eyes met. He was close now, closer than he had been before. The air between them shifted again, thick with everything unspoken. You always bring the housekeepers down here when it storms? She asked. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I don't usually hire ones who snoop through forbidden wings. Her lips parted, but he stepped closer. No apology, he asked quietly. She lifted her chin. You left the door open. I left it ajar. Same thing. No, he murmured, not quite. The lantern flame fluttered. Her back brushed against one of the stone shelves as he stepped even closer. Not touching. Not quite. But near enough that she could feel the heat from his chest. He leaned in, voice barely above a breath. You should be more careful, Sarah. You keep walking into rooms like you want to be caught. Her breath hitched. Maybe I do. His eyes darkened, something shifting behind them, like restraint, cracking. Don't say that, he said, voice rough. Not unless you mean it. Silence, then thunder again, loud and long. She flinched just slightly and he reached out. Finally, his hand brushing her wrist. Light, just a touch, but it was enough. Their bodies didn't touch, but they hovered. Tension humming between them like an electric current. Neither moved, neither dared, and then his fingers slid to her jaw, slowly, reverently. Her heart thudded as he leaned in, lips just inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. "You should leave," he whispered, "but don't." She couldn't, didn't want to. In the silence that followed, with only the storm outside to hear it, she tilted her face toward him, just enough to feel the heat of his mouth graze hers. Not a kiss, not yet, but they were past the point of pretending. She couldn't sleep. The storm had long since faded, but its echoes stayed inside her, under her skin, behind her ribs. Every flicker of lightning still seemed to linger, not in the sky anymore, but in her blood. She lay on the stiff mattress in the old guest room on the second floor, wrapped in too many blankets, listening to the hush of the house. It had been hours since they'd come up from the cellar, and he hadn't touched her. Not really. But he had touched something else. And now it wouldn't quiet. Sarah rose. She didn't know why. Maybe she was restless. Maybe she was reckless. Maybe she just needed to walk, to breathe, to feel the marble beneath her feet again. Or maybe she was looking for him. She padded barefoot down the hallway, her fingers grazing the cold walls. Every sconce she passed flickered gently, like the house was aware of her movements. And then she heard it. Soft steps, not hers. She turned a corner and stopped. He was standing at the far end of the hall, Damian Blackwood, leaning one shoulder against the wall, shirt half buttoned, dark slacks sitting low on his hips, barefoot like her, as if he too had been wandering the night, pulled from sleep by something unnamed. She didn't speak, neither did he, but he pushed off the wall slowly, eyes locked on hers, and started walking toward her, each step deliberate, controlled, as if he were giving her time to run. She didn't. He stopped just inches away. The air between them pulsed with heat. "I told you," he murmured, voice barely more than breath. "You should have left." Sarah's throat tightened. "But I didn't." "No," he said. "You didn't." He reached up, brushed a curl from her cheek, let his fingers linger a heartbeat too long. "Do you know what happens next?" he asked. She swallowed. "Do you?" His jaw twitched. His eyes dropped to her lips. "I want distance," he said, each word like a chain he was trying to hold on to. "You make it impossible." She lifted her chin, heart thundering. "You wanted me in that room. You wanted me in the cellar. You left the door open." He laughed once, soft and dark. Then his voice dropped to a low rasp. "And you keep walking through." Her breath hitched. He leaned in, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his chest, his mouth grazing the shell of her ear. "This is the part where I tell you to go," he whispered, "but I don't want to." Sarah closed her eyes, a tremor running down her spine. "You're playing with fire," she whispered back. He tilted her face toward his, just enough for their lips to almost meet. "No," he said, voice rough and low. "You are." She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, and then he stepped back, only a fraction, enough to remind her he still held the reins. That restraint was still winning, but only barely. "This house has rules," he said, "and so do I." Sarah met his gaze, unflinching, then break them. A pause. Silence curled around them like smoke. He turned from her slowly, but just before he vanished down the corridor, he glanced over his shoulder and said the words that would echo through her every night after. "Next time you walk into my room, don't expect me to pretend I'm asleep." The house never gave up its secrets easily. Rooms appeared to change when she wasn't looking. Furniture subtly moved, curtains drawn or opened, hallways that felt longer at night than they did in daylight. Sarah had learned to follow the rhythm of the estate, not question it. Until the morning she found the door. It wasn't listed on any floor plan the agency had provided. It didn't match the symmetry of the hallway, but there it was, tucked behind a velvet curtain on the third floor, almost as if it had been forgotten. She hadn't meant to pull the curtain back. She was dusting, that was all. But the fabric moved too easily under her fingers, revealing a narrow wooden door with no handle, just a seam. Something in her blood stirred. She pressed her palm against it. It gave a little click. The wall creaked open into darkness. No light, no sound, only warmth still lingering in the air, as if someone had been inside recently. Her feet moved of their own accord. Inside, it was nothing like the rest of the mansion. The space was smaller, intimate, almost suffocating. Wood-paneled walls, a leather armchair, a desk, a single window shuttered tight, and sketches, hundreds of them. Drawings lined the walls, taped, pinned, layered, black ink, charcoal, some detailed, some rushed, almost frantic. All of them of her face from the side, her hands folding laundry, the way she brushed hair behind her ear, the curve of her spine as she bent to reach the lowest shelf. Moments she hadn't even realized were being seen. She reached out, heart pounding, fingers tracing the edge of one. Her expression in the sketch was soft, unaware, honest, too honest. She turned slowly. There were notebooks too, stacks of them on the desk. She flipped one open, notes scrawled in a hand she now recognized. She moves like she doesn't know she's being watched. She leaves the windows cracked open. I close them after she leaves. She's fire. I've built my whole life out of ice. It's melting. She dropped the book. Behind her, the door creaked. She whirled. Damien stood in the doorway, unmoving, unapologetic. His shirt was open at the throat again, sleeves pushed up, the storm still in his eyes. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said, voice low. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "You've been watching me." "Yes. Why?" He stepped forward, slow and sure. No lies, no defense. "Because I couldn't stop." Sarah backed into the desk. "This is obsession." He stopped just in front of her. It started as obsession. His voice was quiet now, rough. Then it became need. His hand lifted, not to touch, but to gesture around them. "I didn't know how to say any of it, so I drew. I wrote. I hid. And now," she whispered. He leaned in, so close she could feel the heat of his body, the restraint coiled tight inside him. "Now I don't want to hide anymore." Her breath trembled between them. "I don't know what this is," she said. "What we're doing, what we've started." He didn't answer, but he lifted his hand, slowly, carefully, and placed it over her heart. It thundered against his palm, and then his voice, husky at her ear. "I feel it too." For one perfect second, they just stood there, his hand on her chest, hers clenched at her sides, the room heavy with what neither of them could put into words. Then he stepped back, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "You wanted truth," he said. "Now you have it." And as he turned and disappeared down the stairs, she realized this wasn't a game anymore. She had seen too much, and she would never see him the same again. She tried to go back to normal, back to dusting the chandeliers, folding linens, washing dishes in the vast marble kitchen. But every corner of the house felt changed, haunted by the feel of his eyes, the sound of his voice, the heat of his hand against her chest. The secret room still lingered behind her thoughts, like something unfinished. The sketches, the notebooks, the way he'd stood there, unapologetic, unhidden for the first time, and the way her heart had leapt at the sight of him. She didn't sleep that night. Again, the next morning, the silence in the house felt thicker, almost expectant, like something waited beneath the surface. She made her way to the sunroom, a space that rarely saw him. The windows overlooked the garden, still drenched from the storm, sunlight breaking through clouds in soft golden beams. She was polishing the glass table when it happened. He walked in, no warning, no footsteps, just suddenly there, as if the house had breathed him into the space beside her. Damien, in a dark gray shirt, sleeves once again rolled, the first 2 buttons undone. He looked tired, less polished, more real, the kind of undone that made her breath catch. He didn't speak at first, just stood in the doorway, watching her. She straightened, cloth still in hand. "This room wasn't on the list today." He didn't answer, only moved toward her slowly, the way he always did, as if testing the floor beneath him. "You're avoiding me," he said at last. Her lips parted. "I'm working." "You've cleaned the same table for 15 minutes. Silence pressed in around them. Then he moved closer. She didn't step back. Couldn't. He was only a breath away now, and when he reached past her to pick up a crystal paperweight, his arm brushed hers, skin to skin. The contact sent something sharp through her, a flare. She turned her face toward him, the scent of him hitting her all at once. Spice, smoke, something faintly citrus, clean, but not cold. Their eyes met. His hand was still on the paperweight, but he didn't move, didn't pull away. She could feel the heat of him down to her spine. "You haven't asked me to explain," he said softly. "You already did," she said. "In that room, every line, every page." He set the paperweight down, and then he reached for her. Not her face, not her hand, her waist. His palm found the curve of it through her sweater, his touch firm and slow. She gasped, but didn't move. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. She didn't. Instead, she stepped into him, fingers curling in the fabric at his chest. His heart beat hard beneath her touch, just as fast as hers. Then came the second touch, his other hand sliding up her spine, warm and careful, until it cradled the back of her neck. He leaned in, mouth brushing the corner of hers. Not quite a kiss, but a thread of one. "I've tried to be good," he whispered against her skin. "Tried to keep my distance, but you never leave." "You didn't want me to," she breathed. A low sound escaped him, half laugh, half groan. "No," he admitted, "I didn't." Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was all tension, all fire, all the nights they'd spent watching and not touching. His lips crushed hers with months of restraint undone in one breathless instant. Her hands tangled in his shirt, his fingers pressed harder at her waist. The glass table behind her rattled under her spine as he walked her backward, every step a surrender. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless, lips bruised, hearts pounding. She touched her mouth, stunned. He touched her cheek, reverent, then softly. "What now?" Sarah looked at him, his disheveled hair, the wildness in his eyes, and smiled. "Now," she whispered, "you break another rule." The kiss had shattered something, or perhaps it had built something instead. Something neither of them had words for, but it didn't end in the sunroom. He pulled away first, jaw tight, breathing ragged. His eyes scanned her face like he was memorizing it, imprinting it deep where no one else could find it. And then he stepped back, just one pace, just enough. "We can't," he said, voice rough. "Not like this." Sarah didn't answer, because part of her agreed, but the rest of her, the part that still felt his mouth on hers, his hands on her waist, was already aching from the space he'd put between them. He left without another word, and for 3 days he didn't appear. No footsteps, no notes, no hallway shadows. It was as if he'd vanished from the house entirely, but she felt him. In the sheets, she changed, creased in the shape of his body. In the books on the nightstand, now slightly out of place. In the wine glass she found in the library, half full again. He hadn't left. He was just trying to control himself. Again. But something had changed in her too. She wasn't the same girl who entered this house looking for a paycheck. Now, she listened for him in the quiet. Now, she caught herself staring at closed doors too long. Now she wanted more than the pull of his gaze in the dark. On the 4th night, well past midnight, she padded to the kitchen in her robe and bare feet, hair messy from hours of tossing and turning. She didn't expect to see him, but there he was, leaning against the marble counter, shirtless, a whiskey glass in his hand. The amber liquid caught the moonlight. So did his eyes when he looked at her. Neither of them moved. The silence stretched, thick and burning. "I can't sleep," she said softly. "I know," he murmured. His voice was lower at night, rougher, as if sleep stripped something human away and left only want. "I've been trying to keep my distance," he said, placing the glass down, "but it's becoming a lie." Sarah stepped closer, slowly. Her voice was barely audible, then stopped lying. She reached him in 3 steps, close enough to see the rise and fall of his chest, the tension in his throat, the veins in his forearms flexing as he tried, again, not to touch her. But she reached first. Her hand slid across his ribs, fingertips brushing heat. He inhaled sharply. "This is a bad idea," he whispered. "I've had worse," she said. "Most involved ramen." His mouth twitched, and then, slowly, he turned to face her, fully this time. No more shadows, no more pretending. He reached out and touched her collarbone. Just that, a soft trace. His hand lingered there, moving down, slowly, reverently, until it rested just above her heart. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then rose again. "I should tell you to go," he said. "But don't," she whispered. His hand curled into her robe, gripping the fabric. Their mouths were inches apart. "You're unraveling me," he murmured. "Then let go," she breathed. The kiss this time was slower, hotter. His lips opened against hers with quiet reverence, with hunger buried under months of restraint. He lifted her onto the counter with a strength that stole her breath, his body pressing between her legs, his mouth dragging fire down her neck. When they finally broke, he rested his forehead against hers, chest heaving. "You don't know what I've done to deserve this kind of wanting." Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck. "Maybe I do." And for the first time, Damien didn't argue, didn't pull away. Instead, he carried her softly, silently, through the dark halls of the house, past the rules, past the warnings, past the point of return, and into the night where warmth finally won. She woke in silk sheets, not the crisp cotton ones she was used to in the guest room. These were softer, darker, expensive, the kind that whispered secrets with every shift of bare skin beneath them. The air still smelled like him, heat and spice and the faintest trace of smoke. He wasn't in bed, but the indent where he'd been was still warm. Sarah sat up slowly, the robe she'd fallen asleep in slipping from one shoulder. Her heart beat in that quiet, tender way it did after surrender, after something had been broken open and nothing would ever fit back the same way again. A knock sounded on the door, not hard, not loud, just a single sharp rap. She pulled the robe tight and opened it. No one, but on the floor lay a black envelope, her name written on the front in that familiar slanted hand. Inside, a note in the greenhouse. "Come only if you're ready to know who I am." Her breath caught. This was more than another rule he was about to break. This was him, unveiled. She didn't hesitate. The greenhouse sat at the edge of the gardens. She had passed it a dozen times and never once seen it open. The path was overgrown, the glass fogged from years of neglect. But this morning, the door stood ajar. Inside, it was wild. Overgrown vines, shadowed orchids, roses blooming in impossible colors. The air was thick with humidity and something sweeter. Jasmine, maybe. The glass above glowed gold from the rising sun. And in the middle he stood, Damien, shirt damp with sweat, sleeves rolled, gloves on his hands as he trimmed a thorned vine with surgical care. She didn't speak, just watched. He sensed her, didn't turn, didn't need to. "This is where I go when I want to remember I'm human," he said quietly. Sarah stepped closer, her sandals crunching on stone. "I didn't know you kept this place." "No one does." He clipped another branch. "I destroyed so many things in my life. I needed to prove I could grow something again." She watched the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders held years of silence. "Tell me," she whispered. He turned finally. His eyes looked different now. Not colder, just tired. "I built a company from nothing," he said. "Made my first million before I was 25. My first billion by 30. And I burned everyone to do it." Sarah stayed quiet. He kept going. "My father, my friends, the only woman I ever thought I could love. I watched them fall behind, push them there, because power was safer than people. Her heart ached at the quiet in his voice. I never wanted to feel again, he said. So I locked myself in this place, hired a rotation of staff I never met, built walls so high even I forgot what was on the other side. And then you walked in. He stepped toward her, slowly, eyes on hers like she was a truth he wasn't ready to admit. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't try to impress me. You just cleaned. Her lips curved. That's my job. No, he said. You looked at this place like it was alive, like it mattered. And then, without knowing, you started looking at me that way too. Silence, heavy, beautiful. She reached for him, fingers brushing the glove on his hand. He let her peel it off. His palm was scarred. Long white lines across the flesh, calluses thick from work. Not the kind you'd expect from a man with his wealth. You've hurt, she whispered. He nodded. And I've hurt others. She stepped in, pressed her hand flat to his chest, then stopped running from it. He looked at her like she'd cracked him open. I want you, he said, then have me. His lips crashed into hers, and this time there was no slow burn, just fire. His hands gripped her waist, hers tangled in his hair. He lifted her effortlessly, sat her on the stone bench behind the orchids, and kissed her until the glass above them fogged again. She wasn't his employee anymore. She was his weakness, and he was already obsessed. The next day, the house was quiet, but inside, everything was breaking open. Sarah stood by the grand window, watching the dawn light stretch across the gardens, gold spilling over wet leaves and petals. The storm had passed, not just the one outside, but the one inside them. Damien came up behind her, his presence soft yet undeniable. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. She leaned back, fitting perfectly into the space he made for her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, raw with things he had kept locked away. I've spent years hiding behind walls, cold, unbreakable. She tilted her head, fingers tracing the scars along his jaw. But those walls kept me from feeling like this, he said, voice barely above a whisper. She turned in his arms, their foreheads touching. All the things I never said, he continued, were because I was scared. Scared to lose control. Scared to let anyone see the man behind the mask. Sarah's eyes filled. But you don't have to be afraid anymore. His hand cupped her cheek. I don't want to be. They kissed, slow, deep, full of promises and beginnings. In that moment, the billionaire wasn't a shadow anymore. He was a man, flawed, fierce, and utterly hers. And she was no longer just the housekeeper. She was home, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.